A very good morning to all the dignitaries, panelists, participants and the fraternity members. I, Dr. Narinder Kumar, Assistant Professor, Faculty of Economics, Chitkara Business School, Chitkara University, Punjab, welcome you all to the second day of the National Colloquium on Approach to Union Budget 2023, a pre-budget expectations. Before proceeding to the actual deliberation of the today's event, I would request Colonel Bikram, Dean HR, CBS, to felicitate our guest and eminent speaker of the day, Professor D.K. Nauriyal, sir, from IIT Roorkee. Sir.
Thank you. I stand honored. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now, I would request Mr. Sundeep Singh, Deputy Registrar, CBS, to felicitate Professor Manesh Chobe from Central University of Sikkim. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel immensely proud to introduce the first speaker of the day, Professor Dinesh Kumar Nauriyal, sir, Professor of Economics, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Roorkee, Uttarakhand. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor D.K. Nauriyal has more than 4 decades of teaching and administrative experience and is source of inspiration to all of us. As far as his academic profile goes, sir, you have completed your graduation from University of Lucknow in 1975, Master degree in Economics from University of Lucknow in 1977. You have done your DPhil from Himwati Nandan Bahuguna University, HNBGU, Srinagar, Garhwal, Uttarakhand in 1983. Sir, as far as your administrative experience goes, sir, you have held various administrative positions such as you were the Vice Chancellor in Kumaon University in Nainital. You were also Vice Chancellor as an additional charge at Uttarakhand Open University, Haldwani, Uttarakhand, Dean of Students Welfare at IIT Roorkee, Chairman to the Hospital Advisory Committee at IIT Roorkee, Head of the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Roorkee, and the list can go on, sir. As far as the academic bodies and associations are concerned, sir, you are an active member of various councils and academic bodies such as Executive Council Member to University of Roorkee, UGC nominee for HNBG, Garhwal University. Sir, you are a member of Indian Economic Association, Indian Association for Study of Population, Population Environment Research Network, United States, Indian Society for Training and Development, New Delhi, and Indian Political Economy Association, New Delhi. Sir, as far as your research profile goes, you have 4 books in your credentials which basically were published with the Taylor and Francis group, and more than 50 plus publication in international and national journals of very high repute. Sir, I feel truly blessed to host you at Chitkara University, and I hope we all benefit from your wisdom and broad knowledge of the subject. Now, without taking much time, I call Dr. D.K. Nauriyal, sir, for his deliberation on the topic of tech manufacturing and budget expectations for 2023. Sir, over to you.
Experience as wonderful one. I have been told to speak on expectations of the budget, union budget, but more on the tech side, probably because I belong to the Institute of Technology, that's why. I would say that budget presentation has always been challenging to all the finance ministers, but never so challenging as it is today. One reason for that is that next year is going to be the election year, and we have very recently overcome the deep crisis of COVID-19. Still we are affected by that, but COVID-19 has had adverse impact on our economy. Our economy went down like anything, the way the rest of the world went down. So here we do have a challenge of recession looming all over the world, the first thing. The challenge for Indian government to keep India afloat, one of the fastest growing economies in the world, the way it is right now, and the challenge of mobilizing the right kinds of resources from all sides. So it's going to be a big challenge. The first thing that I would talk about is this. We have this time for a very credible fiscal consolidation. and if we fail at this juncture, then it's going to be a big menace for us. Maybe we'll nosedive the way the other world economies have been nosediving. The ease of doing business, another major issue is the ease of doing business, which needs to be addressed to maintain higher growth through substantially improved investment and productivity gains. We know that the industry is in the dire need of world-class infrastructure, IT implementation, decongestion of the road ports, lower fuel cost, more logistic parks, then improved warehousing, automation and transparency in government policies. The expectations of the government had never been so high as they are at this point in time, and that makes the budget making a very, very difficult proposition. I must also say that we are facing a challenge of, the finance minister in fact is facing a challenge of fueling powerful technological innovations that may empower consumers and accelerate efficiencies in production processes by several multiples. Reigning in the revenue culture, the phrase which has now become common, is a very big task before the central government and all the state governments together, because revenue culture increases the debt burden of the governments, it reduces the workforce participation in the labor market, and it compromises the medium and long-term economic interests of the nation. Cutting other expenses to meet the budgeted fiscal gap of 6.4% of GDP, as increased subsidies on food grain and fertilizer would eat into federal budget, even though the government has seen strong tax collection for past 1 year. It is also centre's last full year budget ahead of the Lok Sabha election, and therefore we need to look at the issues first of all, and then we'll look into how the government is going to do it. That these are our guessworks, but the guessworks are based upon empirical evidences and very solid base of data. The one major challenge that finance minister is facing right now is the increasing subsidized food grain budget, and this may rise to roughly around rupees 2.7 lakh crore this fiscal year, as the government continues to provide support to the poor at least until December. Then federal government food subsidies also likely to go up by 30% over rupees 2.07 lakh crore estimated in the budget, last budget. Then again, the government is also staring at a very high fertilizer subsidy bill, overestimated rupees 1.05 lakh crore in the budget, as the war in Ukraine has led to a surge in prices all over. Further, there is a need to reprioritize the expenditures of the government of India over the medium term to ensure that the use of borrowing for revenue expenditure is minimized and eventually eliminated. This is a major problem right now. This will imply that any borrowing would lead to higher capital expenditure that would lead to creation of assets, which probably would improve the productivity gains for and technology adoption for Indian economy. What exactly are the expectations, and if the expectations would be belied or they would be met, is something that we need to look at the past and what exactly is expected of the government. With purchasing power looking to grow in the post-pandemic era, coupled with the government's version of Atmanirbhar Bharat, infrastructure, capital goods and consumer durables could be the main beneficiaries. This is what is expected. Infrastructure, agriculture and capital goods could see positive momentum, coupled with banking as credit penetration continues to improve. The government's focus is expected to be on growing consumption, increasing the domestic demand and improving the infrastructure. That's the only way to move away from the worldwide recession. Then the second thing is plans to deepen indigenous R&D effort must be kick-started. For instance, in the new national education policy, the government has envisaged to established National Research Foundation on the pattern of United States. So if this National Research Foundation fructifies, its functions do fructify and it fructifies and fructified, and its mandate is fructified, then this will fuel indigenous innovations, and that would be a kind of transforming period for India, transitioning period for India to move away from low tech to medium tech and high tech exports. We'll talk about these issues in a short while from now. MSMEs are another major challenge, how to make them grow. We all know that they contribute around 30% to our GDP and have a share of 50% of the income generated from the total exports. This sector is expecting an easier line of credit, which is one of the biggest requirements of MSMEs, where their working capital gets choked because of delayed payments and challenges in the supply chain. Let's look at where from the rupee comes and where the rupee goes, and that will help us to gauge the maneuvering the finance minister is left with. We know that 35 paise comes from borrowings and other liabilities, means fiscal deficit. Corporation tax and income tax both together contribute around 30% of the government revenue, 15% each. From custom duties we get 5% of the revenue. From union excise duties we get 7% of the revenue. Goods and service tax contributes to the extent of 16%. Non-tax revenue is 5%, and non-debt capital receipts are 2%. So we don't have any way to maneuver here. If we want to reduce the borrowings and other liabilities, which gives rise to the fiscal deficit and is partly used for, in fact, a major part of it is used for meeting the revenue deficit, then, and if we reduce the corporation tax, for example, or income tax, both of these do contribute to the level of 30%. Probably government would not take a chance to reduce either of them. If they do it, they would have resource crunch. These are the two major contributors. Almost one third of the revenue comes from these two taxes. Custom duties do contribute to the extent of 5%. So other dues, goods and service tax is also contributing to the extent of 16%. So I don't see if the government does have enough leverage to reduce either of these. So I think the people shouldn't really expect much of the relief from the government provisions, because government is tight-lipped and is cash-strapped right now. When government funding is going towards the creation of infrastructure, government cannot take chance of reducing its revenue. It's revenue-hungry budget, and therefore I don't see much of the relief coming to the income taxpayers or corporation taxpayers. I'm pretty sure they would continue the way they are. Personally, on personal level, I would like the income tax to be reduced, but it's my personal liking. The government probably would not really do it. Where the rupee goes, again, that's very important for us to look at. We spend roughly around 20% in interest payment. This is our biggest payment, and we cannot reduce it. So this expenditure cannot be reduced. Centrally sponsored schemes do contribute to the level of 6%. Central sector schemes 15%. Both of them together do contribute quite substantially where the money is spent. Government cannot also reduce the defense budget, especially in view of the kinds of threats that we are facing from all around, especially from the northern side and from the western side. Defense budget probably would not be tampered with, will not be manipulated. Subsidies are something which government probably would not touch upon, because next year is the election year, so government may become quite unpopular. Government would not take that cost. Then there are certain regulatory transfers. Finance Commission and other transfers, for example, they consume 10% of the government resources. Then state share of taxes and duties would consume 17% of budget. Pension 4% and other expenditure 9%. So I don't see government having much of the liberty in tampering with or manipulating any one of these items. So the challenge is big as to how to please the people and at the same time how to sustain the growth without compromising on the medium and long term interests. So that's it. If we look at the Indian budget, and if I am to speak about the kinds of subsidies that we are, kinds of payment which interest payment liability of the government demands, then we would see that most of the fiscal deficit that we create, or most of the borrowings that the government creates, goes towards the payment of interest. So it's 125.7 US billion dollar, which is a huge sum, and this is the government is paying towards the interest payment liability. Defense is consuming much less, 51.5%, transport 47%, then transfer to states roughly around 44.7%, pensions 27.7%, food subsidies 27.6%, rural development is taking away around 27.6%, and tax administration 22.9%. So where is the scope for manipulation on the part of the government is something that makes me ponder as what the government should really do. If we look at the interest payment again as a percentage of revenue receipts, so it has moved up from 36% way back in 2011-12 to 43% by 2022-26, and the life of the government was made difficult by the COVID-19, because this interest payment as a percentage of revenue receipts was brought down to the level of 36% by 2019-20. It shot up to 42% by 2021. Again was brought down to 39% by 21-22, but it has now again shot up, expected to shoot up around 43%. So it's a huge liability, and borrowings on the part of the government might create a problem in future if it is not very effectively reined in. Among all subsidies, food subsidies and fertilizer subsidies, they take away 90% of the total money spent on subsidies. So for instance, food subsidy in 2022-23 is estimated to be roughly around 58.16% of the total subsidies granted by the government, and fertilizer subsidies to the extent of 29.59%, both of them together roughly around 90%. Petroleum subsidies, interest subsidies and other subsidies are much less, but how the government would cope with the rising food subsidy and fertilizer subsidy on account of Ukraine crisis is something that we need to look at, and finance minister must use all her skills in order to manage these two situations. If these two subsidies could be managed at a reasonable level, government would be able to reduce its expenditure very effectively, which is call of the day. But let's see what the finance minister does on that count. Must I also say that revenue receipts had been higher on the higher side than the capital receipts, but most of the capital receipts were used for revenue expenditure, for meeting the revenue deficit, and that's a precarious situation. In fact, if the government borrows, nothing wrong with it if it is spent on infrastructure creation or creation of other assets which might make India a very investment friendly country. Unfortunately, because of rising menace of interest payment liability, lots of borrowings which government of India is doing is not going towards the capital expenditure, but is only meeting the revenue deficit, and that's a very precarious situation. How the finance minister does it is something to be seen. It's a very delicate balance which she'll have to maintain. Then I must also point it out that revenue deficit budgeted versus actual, in almost all the cases, actual revenue deficit had been on the higher side than the budgeted ones because of rising expenditures of the government over a period of time. If you look at the fiscal budget, then in 2021 the fiscal deficit was much higher than the estimated one, budgeted one, right? For all the years, almost fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP had been on the lower side than the actual fiscal deficit. and this situation is likely to remain the same, with the exception of 2021 when the fiscal deficit was very high, but now probably it would be brought down to the level of 6.4%, which is the government figure for the financial year which is now going. Similarly, we can also look at central government receipts and so on and so forth. But here, I would say something else. Apart from the short-term and medium-term objectives, the budgets do have the long-term objectives as well. Now, India is increasingly becoming an investment-friendly country. But if we look at the data, in the global competitive index, we are at 37th place. We have moved up over a period of time. We were having 48th position way back in 2000 in the global competitive index. Then by 2011 it was 56th, deteriorating, but it has tremendously improved after that, and now we do have 37th position in terms of global competitive index. So if we want to improve this situation further, then the government must look at its fiscal policy and must also make certain provisions for making our production technology based and should fuel the innovations, the latest innovations. I might here also say that if we look at similar figures for China, China was having 40th position way back in 2000. It's now 17th in the global competitive index. So it's precisely because China has fueled innovations. And if we look at the latest patent figures, then China has filed maximum patents all over the world. United States follows China. China is number one now. So China has been fueling its innovations, has been promoting innovations, encouraging them, and that helped China to move up from 40th place to 17th place. There are few other countries which appear to be non-entity to us, like Qatar, for example, or Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, and even Saudi Arabia for that matter. They all are better than us when it comes to the global competitive index. And this competitive index will come from the ease of doing business and providing right kind of infrastructure, the transparent government policies, and quick decision making when it comes to the tax administration. So this is what the government needs to look at. If we look at global innovation index, for example, then India is in a problem. For instance, in infrastructure we are 78th. In human capital and research we are 43rd. In institutions we are 54th. In business sophistication we are 54th. Market sophistication wise we are at 19th position, but we need not to look at isolation. We need to look at it with respect to the rest of the world. So our comparable country China. So if we talk about China and look at the infrastructure, one of the parameters for measuring the global innovation index, then China stands at 25th place as compared to India's 78th place. So strengthening infrastructure is a major challenge before this budget, and this budget must show up that it can stand up to that expectation. India, unfortunately, is still a factor-driven country. China, on the other hand, China, Brazil, even Sri Lanka, even South Africa, Russian Federation, all of them are in efficiency-driven stage now, the stage 2. And most of the developed countries are in stage 3, which are innovation-driven countries. So if you want to move away from factor-driven, where we claim that cheap labor is our basic strength, then we should know that the world is driving more towards knowledge-intensive products and services, and therefore the factor-driven advantage or mileage would disappear very soon. The economies will thrive on the efficiency and on innovation, and this is what the budget needs to realize. And if you look at the global R&D expenditure, I would just give you a comparable figure for India and few other countries. For instance, United States has pegged up its budget from 2.61% of GDP way back in 2000 to 3.45% of GDP by 2022. European Union has also pegged up its budget from 1.67% to 2.36%. China has moved up substantially when it comes to R&D intensity, from 0.89% way back in 2000 to 2.40% in 2022. South Korea is another milestone here, from 2.18% of GDP in 2000. It has moved up to 4.81. Almost 5% of GDP is being spent on research and development. In India, we had been down, in fact, from 0.74% R&D expenditure as a ratio of GDP to 0.66%. So government needs to make special provisions for encouraging the R&D in the country. Without this, the dream of Atmanirbhar Bharat, or the dream of becoming a 5 trillion economy immediately, or say catching up with China in times to come, would be extremely difficult to be realized. So we need to understand, the budget makers need to understand that spending more on R&D is need of the hour, and this is what they need to do. If we look at the empirical evidence also shows to us that there had been very strong correlation between R&D and GDP growth. And whenever the R&D, business R&D in particular, has dipped down, the economic GDP growth has also taken a nosedive. Must I tell you that while business R&D in United States or even in China or in many other countries shares roughly around 80% of the, more than 80% of the total R&D expenditure, in India it is not even 50% now. So private sector must be encouraged to conduct its own R&D, so as to technologically upgrade its products and services over a period of time. The world is moving up, and therefore we also need to move up. So with this, I think I would pass on this baton to others here. Probably they would have more inputs to share with you. I think I have shared my set of inputs with all of you. Labor productivity growth again is a major issue. In India, labor productivity is much less. It is falling all over the world. It is also falling in China, but in China it has gone up like anything. And world labor productivity growth looked up just because of very fast labor productivity growth in China. We are way behind still in terms of the labor productivity. And if we look at the productivity gains over a period of time, United States and all other countries are at the forefront of it. We are much lower, and these productivity levels can be augmented by making certain incentives or providing for certain incentives in our budget. With that, I would give this platform to others to speak their minds and give you additional inputs on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your insights on the budget and the way you have broken down this entire budget and from where money comes and from where to where it goes. I think it's basically an eye-opener for me as well, as I also come from the economics background. But the way you have deliberated on this, sir, and it's very commendable that I also got to know so many new things. Thank you so much, sir, for your expertise and your deliberation on this. Sir, we have some questions from the audience. So first question goes, so what is your opinion? What is your thought on, you just explained that how technology is going to be a major player when it comes to transition our economy. So technology is very important. But sir, what is your opinion that, do you think that India has to pay any cost if we, jump into this technological war and we, start progressing our country towards a technologically driven economy? What do you think, do we risk of this unemployment as well, as India is a labor intensive economy? If we move forward, if we move towards the technological breakthrough, do you think that we can risk unemployment also in the economy? What's your
Okay, I mean, this is a very interesting question in the sense that these kinds of doubts were raised when computerization was on its way in India as well. Everybody thought that with computerization there would be mass unemployment, but it has not happened that way. With technology we need to upgrade our skills. That is it. We cannot keep with manual labor or semi-skilled labor and go at the top of the world. We cannot do it. We need to upgrade our skills, and we need to go for high-tech manufacturing, medium-tech manufacturing, because these are the ways through which you can have greater value addition, and you can also earn good reputation as economic power. So if we continue with that kind of syndrome, where we feel that it will increase our employment, it will decrease our employment, it will not. The only thing is that skills need to be upgraded on sustained basis, so that our workforce is ready to take up the new kinds of job. The world belongs to knowledge-driven technologies now, and therefore we also need to upgrade ourselves for that.
Thank you so much, sir. There is one more question. So, as you have also talked about the MSMEs and how they play as a crucial role in the overall development of the industry. Sir, my question is, recently Government of India has to, bail out these MSMEs because of their, they were into debt. Now, do you think this is, in what way we can say that our industry can also become sustainable, can also progress in a way like the industry is working in other western parts of the world. So, if we are looking towards that type of scenario, do you think the financial, what we can say independence of these small MSMEs is also pertinent in this case?
Okay, thank you. It's again another interesting question. SMEs are having some problems. One problem is the technology, because there are less innovations in the country, and therefore they are not able to update themselves in terms of product quality, product ranges, and so on and so forth. And the second is the line of credit, which I also talked about. These are the two things, and we must not forget that they are down right now because of the COVID-19 after effects. Our informal sector, and even formal sector for that matter, had been heavily damaged by this crisis. So this crisis needs to be taken care of by the government as well. The government and both the MSME sector needs to do it hand in hand, and they are required to be supported by government by extending to them the easy line of credit. And the second thing, the National Research Foundation, which if it comes up with the applied technologies and experimental development technologies, and if these technologies can be diffused to the MSME sector, that would help these two sectors a lot. But just giving them a line of credit is not enough. They need something more, the technologies, so that they are able to compete with that par with the rest of the world. That's again need of the hour, and government must support MSMEs on these two fronts.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the last question from my side is, what do you think, sir, whether this time also in this upcoming budget government would give any boost to the industrial sector, like it's basically an expectation, like India is running this Atmanirbhar Abhiyan, under which Government of India is helping out domestic industries. Do you think there will be some new boost coming from the government side to the domestic industries?
I believe right now government doesn't have enough margin to maneuver. So I don't see great things to come right now. But in times to come, I am pretty sure government will do it, because the manufacturing sector has the huge employment potential, and if we are to provide more employment to the people, we cannot depend much on services sector, where the employment is much less as compared to industry. So, and with Atmanirbhar Bharat dream, I think industries need to be supported. How the government is going to do it is something interesting to watch, but I don't see much of the hope right now, because this is the last budget of this government. So, but I'm pretty sure the kind of vision that our Honorable Prime Minister does have for the economy, I'm pretty sure something would happen. What would happen is very difficult to have conjecture. It's difficult to guess. But there would be some easy line of credit for the industries. I'm pretty sure, and maybe they will slightly bring down the corporation tax. It's already quite low, but it's not at par with the rest of the world. So it does have a scope for reducing it by further 5%. But let's see what the government does. Government is also very resource hungry, and it does have lots of works in hand. Therefore, it's very difficult to see government bringing down the rate of corporation tax. But let's see what the government does this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.